My name is Solomon Nichols. I'm 62 years old, and I fix refrigerators for a living. The night it happened, there were 4 camera lights standing in my son's living room, and a young man with a clipboard asked me very politely to wait in the kitchen so I wouldn't be in the shot. I went. I changed a flickering bulb for them while they set up. Then the host asked my son who made his success possible. My son smiled. He said, "I built myself from nothing." I was holding a glass. I set it down soft because everything in that house was expensive. I want you to know I was going to let it go. I was. My family had been quiet for 30 years and I was good at quiet. Then they touched my wife's name. Before we go further, take a second to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I like knowing who's sitting with me. Now let me take you back to March 2026. The crew arrived at 2 in the afternoon and took 4 hours to make a living room look like a living room. I was staying in my son's house outside Philadelphia because the man who owned my shop in Ashfield had sold the whole block to a storage chain. 3 weeks, Grant said. Stay 3 weeks. I'd been there 11 days. A production assistant found me by the coffee maker. She had a headset and a kind face. "Sir, could you stand on the other side of the island? We're going wide." I said sure. I moved. Then their key light started ticking, that flutter you get from a loose contact, and I watched 2 men in black shirts stare at it like it was weather. I got the ladder from the garage. I seated the bulb, gave the collar a quarter turn, and it held. Somebody said thanks to the room in general. They put my son in the chair at 6:40. He looked good. He always looked good. Bianca stood behind camera 2, with her arms crossed, mouthing words along with him. The host saved the soft one for last. "Grant, who made all this possible." He paused. 2 seconds. I counted them because I know my son's face better than I know my own, and 2 seconds is where he goes when he's choosing. Then he smiled. "I built myself from nothing." Nobody in that room turned around. Why would they? I looked down at my hands. There was still a little dust on them from their light. The assistant came by later, winding cable, and asked if I was with the catering company. I said no. I said I was family. The next morning, Grant came down for coffee and didn't mention it at all. I let him get halfway through the cup. That's a thing you learn raising a boy alone. Never start with a man before his coffee. "Last night," I said, "when you said from nothing." He looked up, friendly, ready. "You meant we didn't have money," I said, "right, growing up?" "It's positioning, Dad." He said it the way you'd say it's Tuesday. "We tested it on 4,000 people. Self-made pulls 31 points higher on trust. It isn't about you. It isn't about anybody. It's about a man in a kitchen," I said. He laughed like I'd made a joke, and I let him think I had. Bianca came in, barefoot, kissed the top of his head, and reached past me for the oat milk. "Dad, don't personalize marketing," she said. "It'll eat you alive." She smiled when she said it. She always smiled when she said it. Grant took his phone into the hall. Bianca went upstairs. I stood there with the fridge humming behind me, the one appliance in that house I'd have trusted with my life. And I noticed a spiral-bound folder on the corner of the island. Somebody had left it face up. I didn't open it. I want that on the record. I have never in my life opened another man's paperwork. But the cover had a heading in bold, and I have good eyes for small print, and it said, "Avoid living parent references. See Section 4, Origin Integrity." I read it 3 times. Living parent. Like a category on a form. Like there was a box and I was in it. I stood there long enough for the coffee to go cold, wondering what a man has to write in Section 4 to make Section 4 necessary. To tell it right, I have to go back to a Tuesday in November of 1996. Ellen was 34. She was the librarian at Ashfield Elementary, which, in a town our size, meant she was also the nurse, the lost and found, and the person who decided which 9-year-olds were allowed to cry in private. She was making toast. She said, "So, something's wrong with the light." Then she went down. They called it an aneurysm. She lasted 3 days at Kellen County General. I was 32 years old, and I stood in that hallway with grease still under my fingernails because I'd come straight off a call and never thought to wash. Grant was 9. He sat in a plastic chair reading a library book that was 4 weeks overdue. His mother was the only person in that town who could forgive a fine, and he knew it, and he'd been trading on it since he was 6. On the last night she was awake, she made me lean down. "Books remember who paid for them, soul," she said. "People forget. Books don't." I thought it was the medication. I told her I loved her. She said it back, and then she said something else, and I made her a promise in that room that I kept for 30 years. I'm not going to tell you yet what the promise was. I need you to see the rest first, or you'll think I'm a better man than I am. After the funeral, I found a notebook in her nightstand. Cloth cover blue, the kind you buy at a drugstore. On the first page in her handwriting, 2 words. College fund. Underneath, she'd written a number. $214. That was everything we had for it. That was the whole plan. Here's how you turn $214 into a college education. You work. Days at Delco Appliance, 7 to 4. Nights at the Ashfield Paper Mill, 6 to 2. 14 years. I slept 4 hours, and I slept them in the truck in the mill lot with a coat over the window. In 2003, I sold the house on Bell Hollow Road. Ellen had painted those window frames green the summer we bought it. $61,000 went to the hospital, and the rest went into an account with one purpose. Grant was 16. He didn't say a word the entire week we packed. He carried boxes and looked at the floor. Then came 2005 and the part I still catch myself proud of. Ashfield State takes payment 3 ways. I only trusted one. 25 minutes each way 4 times a year I drove to the bursar's office with a money order in my shirt pocket, and I paid at the counter like a man paying rent. 32 times. Fall and spring, 6 years through the masters, not one of them late. Window 3 had a woman with reading glasses on a chain who stamped every receipt twice. "Second one's for you," she said. "Paper fades." I kept the stubs in a Danish butter cookie tin because that's where a man my age keeps things. In 2009, the university sent a letter. They wanted me on stage at Commencement with the first-generation parents. There was a line for my name. I said no. I said no because I owned 2 shirts with my name stitched on the pocket, and my son was 22, and I didn't want him standing next to that. I've had 20 years to think about that word. It's the most expensive one I ever said. In 2012, my son was 25, unemployed, and sleeping on my couch. He'd been let go from a logistics firm in Harrisburg. He came home with 2 duffel bags and a laptop with a cracked hinge, and for 4 months he sat at my workbench at 1140 Fenner Street and wrote the first version of Kestrel. I want to be fair to him, because I'm going to say hard things later. He worked. God, he worked. He stole Wi-Fi from the bakery next door, and I ran an extension cord out to the alley so he could sit closer to the signal in July. In January, I built him a heater out of an old oil burner and a squirrel cage fan, and it smelled like a diesel truck, and he never once complained. In March, he needed to register the company with the state. He needed an address and a registered agent. "Can I use the shop?" he said. "And your name? Does that make me owe anybody money?" "No, Dad, it's just an address." So I signed. He signed underneath me. We drove it to the mailbox on Fenner together at 11 at night because he wanted the postmark. Then we sat in the truck with the heater running, and he said something I have carried for 14 years. "Dad, your name's on this thing, right at the top." He was 25. He meant it. That's the part people never believe. I never read that form again. Not once. I filed my copy in the cookie tin with the receipts because to me, it was all one drawer of paper, all of it his, all of it done. He was right, though. My name was at the top. It just wasn't at the top of anything anymore. February of this year, the block on Fenner sold. Storage chain out of Delaware. I lost the shop and the 2 rooms above it in the same signature. I had a plan. Ashfield's not expensive, and I've never once been out of work. Then Grant called, and his voice was the voice from the truck. "Come stay with us. A few weeks. Let me do one thing." I said yes, and I'm not going to pretend it was about the money. Riley is 13. She has her grandmother's habit of asking the question everybody else is being polite about. The second day I was there, she helped me pull the back off their dryer, and she handed me the nut driver before I asked for it, which nobody has ever done. Then she said, "Grandpa, how come you're not in any of the pictures on the stairs?" There are 31 frames on that staircase. I counted later, alone like a fool. That same week, a man named Curtis Denham started appearing, Chief Communications Officer, gray suit, good shoes, the walk of a man who's never waited for anything. He came through the kitchen while I was at the table, looked directly at me, and spoke to the house manager. "How long is he here?" "Not you. He. The only thing of mine still in Ashfield was a 10 by 10 storage unit off Route 6. Ellen's things. Her books, her sewing machine, the birthday tapes, the stamp from the school library. $84 a month, every month for 22 years. I mention it now because that Thursday night after everyone had gone up, Curtis knocked on my door with a leather folder under his arm. "Mr. Nichols, 10 minutes. It's about protecting your son." He sat on the edge of the guest bed like a man visiting a hospital. "We'd like to bring you on as a legacy consultant," he said. $250,000, one payment. "For what work?" "For your discretion. Through the IPO and 24 months after." He slid 12 pages across the quilt. I read the way I read a wiring diagram with my finger, one line at a time. It took a while. He checked his watch twice, and I let him. Page 4, Section 3, Paragraph B. The undersigned acknowledges that he made no material, financial, physical, or operational contribution to the education or business formation of Grant Nichols. I read it again to be sure I hadn't put my own meaning in it. "Mr. I said, "Does this make me lie? It makes you quiet. Those are different." "Not on paper, they aren't." He smiled with the bottom half of his face. "Take the night." He gathered the folder, and when he lifted it, a second document slid partway out and stopped against my knee. A cover proof. Heavy stock, a boy standing alone on a set of railroad tracks. Nothing to Something, a memoir by Grant Nichols, September 2026. Curtis put it back without hurrying, which told me more than hurrying would have. I sat there after he left, with the quilt still creased where he'd been. There was a book about my son's life. 400 pages probably. Somebody had drawn a cover for it, and priced it, and picked a season for it. And in 39 years, not one person in that house had thought to tell me it existed. In the morning I told Curtis no. He nodded like a man crossing off step one. That night, Bianca took me to dinner. Just us, a place in Wayne with low lights and a corner table, and she ordered me the pot roast without asking, which she knew was my order because she'd asked me once, 4 years ago, and written it down somewhere. She was good. I have to give her that. She was very good. She talked about her father first. Foreclosure in 1999, a sheriff's notice taped to a storm door, her mother packing dishes into pillowcases. She cried a little, at exactly the moment a person cries. I believed all of it. I still do. That's what makes her dangerous. Then she reached across and put her hand on my wrist. "Riley worships you," she said. "I know. I don't want her growing up in a family with lawyers in it." Nobody had said lawyers. Nobody had said one word about lawyers. I looked at the candle for a second. "Bianca," I said, "the book, when did you start it?" "It's been in edit since last spring." She caught herself half a heartbeat late. The second pass came back in January. Second pass, which meant a first pass, which meant a manuscript, which meant an outline, which meant a year of somebody sitting in a room deciding which parts of my life were usable. She smiled and squeezed my wrist. "Nobody's asking you to disappear, Dad. We're asking you to let him have one clean thing." I ate the pot roast. It was very good. I thanked her for it, and I meant that too. But I was doing arithmetic under the table, and the number I kept landing on was this. Somebody had already written about Ellen. I hadn't read a word of it. Saturday, Grant flew to Chicago, and Bianca took Riley to a meet. I went looking for a Phillips head, and I found the study door open. The manuscript was on the desk, face up, spiral bound open, weighted flat with a coffee cup. I did not touch it. I want that understood. I have never opened another man's paperwork, and I didn't start at 62. I read what was showing, page 41. His mother vanished from his life before he was 10. I stood there and read that sentence maybe 9 times. Vanished. A word you use for a woman who walks out. A word you use for a woman who gets in a car. Nowhere on that page did it say Kellen County General. Nowhere did it say November. Nowhere did it say 34 years old. Then 4 lines down, a father who was around in the way weather is around. Weather. I turned my head, just my head, and read the chapter heading at the top of the page. Chapter 3, The Boy Who Paid His Own Way. At the bottom, in smaller type, a note. Special thanks to Bianca, who found the story inside the noise. The noise. I went out to the garage and sat in my truck for an hour without starting it. My hands were shaking, and I'm a man who solders for a living. Here's what I understood sitting there. He didn't kill her. He wrote her out. I've had months to decide which of those takes more work, and I still don't know. I waited up until 11:20 on Sunday, when the car came up the drive. Then I went and found my son, and for the first time in my life, I didn't knock. He was still in his coat. He saw my face and sat down on the arm of the couch like his legs had quit. You read it. I read one page. He put both hands over his mouth. Then he did something I hadn't seen since he was 9 years old in a plastic chair. He came apart. He talked for 20 minutes. 90 million in personal loans collateralized in his own stock. 1,400 employees. A road show in 8 weeks, and if the road show died, 300 people in Allentown lost jobs in November. I listened. I didn't interrupt. A man in that condition needs a wall, not an argument. Then he said the true thing. You wore the Delco shirt to my junior awards night. I came off a call. I know, I was 16. He looked at the floor. I've been ashamed of being ashamed ever since, so I just stopped putting you in the room. I sat down across from him. I could have said 100 things. I've thought of all 100 since. What I said was this. Keep every word about me. Weather's fine. I've been called worse. I waited until he looked up. Take back the ones about your mother. That's the whole list. Dad, that's the whole list, Grant. He wiped his face with the flat of his hand and stood up and put his arms around me, and he was warm, and he smelled like airport, and he said, I'll fix it. Monday. We shook on it, which is a thing we've done since he was small. I went to bed believing in. I want you to know that. At 62 years old, I still went to bed believing my son. I got up at 1 for water. The light under Bianca's office door was still on. Wednesday, the revision came back. Bianca brought it to me herself, which should have been the warning. We took care of it, she said. Page 41, line 6. His mother was no longer present in his daily life. I looked up at her. She died, I said. That's not inconsistent with the sentence. She died on a Thursday. She was 34. She stamped library books for 11 years. Legal cleared it, Dad. Her voice stayed soft the whole time. It never once went up. It's technically accurate. It just doesn't serve the pacing. There it was, the pacing. Grant was in the doorway. He'd been there long enough to hear the whole thing. He looked at the carpet and he said, Bianca, maybe? And then he didn't finish it, and she waited, and he didn't finish it. That was the moment. Not the interview, not the 12 pages on the quilt, that doorway. I said thank you for bringing it up because my mother raised me, and I took the pages back to the guest room. The cover proof was clipped to the front. I looked at it properly this time. A boy. Railroad tracks. Long grass. No one behind him. No one ahead of him. Nothing in the frame but a kid and a horizon. They'd art-directed the loneliness. Someone got paid for that. No longer present. That's what they call a woman who kept a library card for 11 years and forgave every fine in a town of 9,000 people. I sat on that bed for a long time, doing something I hadn't done since the hospital hallway, which was thinking clearly and slowly at the same time. If they'd do that to a woman who was dead, I wanted to know what they had planned for a man who wasn't. Friday, there was a suitcase outside my door, not packed, just standing there helpful. We thought you'd want the guest house, Bianca said. More space, your own kitchen. It had its own kitchen, I'll give it that. No, it rained the thin kind, and I came back from the hardware store and the gate code didn't work. I tried it 4 times. I stood at that gate for 20 minutes before I let myself push the buzzer, because a man doesn't like to ring the bell at a house he's living in. The house manager apologized. Security update, she said. She was sorry. She really was. Tuesday, Bianca found me by the trash bins. Going forward, let's book Riley time through Marguerite. Book it. She's at a sensitive age, and you tell her sad things. I've told that child two sad things in her life. One was that her grandmother died in November. The other was that a dryer belt cost $9 and a service call costs $140. That night, 10:15, a knock on the guest house door. Riley in pajama pants and rain boots, hair wet, holding a piece of paper folded into quarters. Family history unit. Write about the person who most shaped your family. She'd written about me. 2 pages in pencil, with the letters leaning the way hers do. Across the top, in her mother's hand in blue, "Let's do this one again, sweetheart. Accuracy matters." At the bottom of the second page, Riley had drawn a house. Small, boxy one. Tree. The window frames were colored in green. "Riley," I said, "where'd you see that house?" "The picture in your storage unit. From last year," she shrugged. "The one you showed me." Then she said, "Mom says it isn't accurate, but you're the accurate part, Grandpa." I want to stop the story here for a second, because I know some of you are watching this in a house you're not sure you're welcome in anymore. Maybe it's your kid's house. Maybe it's the one you paid for. If you know what it's like to stand outside a gate you used to have the code to, hit that like button and tell me in the comments how long you stood there. I read them. All of them. Alright, back to it. Because 2 days later I drove home to Ashfield, and that's where it got worse. 2 hours and 10 minutes on the turnpike. I know it to the minute. I went to the cemetery first, Section C near the maintenance road, which Ellen would have found funny. I told her about Riley's paper. I didn't tell her about page 41. A man can be a coward at a graveside and still call it kindness. Then I met Walt Brennan at the diner on 2nd, same as every time. Walt and I ran the same night shift for 11 years. He's 66 and he says things out loud that I only think. I told him most of it, not the money. He stirred his coffee for a while. "Saul," he said, "you didn't raise a rich man. You raised a man who needs you not to exist." That's a hell of a thing to say. You want the other kind of friend? They're at the counter. I paid for both breakfasts and drove out Route 6 to the storage unit because Riley's birthday was in June and I wanted her grandmother's library stamp. There was a yellow notice taped across the door. Notice of termination. Auto pay canceled. Account 61 days delinquent. Contents subject to lien sale under Pennsylvania self-storage law. I read it twice standing in the wind. Inside, the kid at the desk pulled it up. "Card was removed off the account in March, sir. Online." "By who?" He turned the monitor an inch toward me, the way they do when they know they shouldn't. The account name on the changelog was B. Nichols. "When's the auction?" He looked at his screen, then at me, and got quiet the way young people do when they realize they're about to be the one who says it. "Sir," he said, "it was this morning. Lot 114 sold for $340 to a woman named Doreen Casper, who resells at the flea market in Milton. It took me a day and a half and 9 phone calls to find her." She was standing in a pole barn with a box cutter in her hand when I got there. I told her who I was. I watched her face change. "The sewing machine's gone," she said. "Sold Saturday. Books went as a lot 30 for $20. The tapes I don't know. There was a bag of tapes and I can't find it." 22 years of $84 a month and a bag of tapes she can't find. She walked me back to a plastic tote in the corner. Inside was a green cardigan. Under that, a blue cloth notebook with the words "College Fund" on the first page in handwriting I could pick out of 10,000. And under that, a Danish butter cookie tin. "That one I kept out," Doreen said. "Looked like somebody's paperwork. I don't throw away paperwork." 32 receipt stubs rubber-banded by year, every one of them stamped twice, and underneath the stubs, folded in thirds, a document I hadn't looked at since 2012, because to me, it had always been his. Certificate of Organization, Kestrel Freight Systems LLC, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, March 2012. Registered office, 1140 Fenner Street, Ashfield. Registered agent, Solomon Nichols. I tried to pay Doreen back her $340. She wouldn't take it. "Mister," she said, "I sell dead people's things for a living. Yours is the first box anybody came back for." I put the tote in the truck bed and tied a tarp over it. 3 pieces of paper had just come back to me in the same afternoon, and I had no idea yet what any of them were for. I carried the cookie tin into that kitchen and set it on the granite island, and the sound it made was the sound of a tin can on stone, and everybody turned around. Bianca, the storage unit on Route 6. She didn't flinch. She didn't even put down her phone right away. I canceled it in March. Why? $84 a month for a room full of mildew. She set the phone down then. I was cleaning up after you. Honestly, Dad, you could thank me. The refrigerator cycled on. That's what I remember. The refrigerator kicked on behind me. Grant was at the counter with a glass of water in his hand. He said, Bianca. That's all. One word, no verb. He looked at me for a second, and then he looked into the glass, and my son is 39 years old, and he stood in his own kitchen and studied a glass of water. That silence cost more than anything, she said. Curtis came in from the hall with a folder already open. He'd been close enough to hear. He put the 12 pages back on the island and set a pen on top of them, square, like a place setting. 400,000, he said. Same terms. No. Mr. Nichols, he buttoned his jacket, if this becomes noisy, the company will have to be candid with reporters about your health, your history with alcohol. Riley was on the stairs. I saw her hand on the rail. I have never had a drink in my life. My father drank. Everyone at that island knew it, including the man who said it. I picked up the tin. At the door I stopped and I said it to Grant, not to them, and I said it quiet. You can have the story. You can't have her. 3 days later, a finance blog ran a piece about the Kestrel offering. 1,100 words, mostly numbers. Paragraph 9 said this. A source close to the family describes the founder's estranged father as having a history with alcohol and an interest in benefiting from his son's success. Estranged. History. Interest in benefiting. 26 words. I've built things that took less thought. My phone started ringing at 7:40 in the morning, and it did not stop. Ray at the transmission shop asking if I was all right. Then Doris from 2 doors down at the old house. Then Pastor Whitfield, who did Ellen's service, who wanted me to know the church was there. Nobody accused me of anything. That was the worst of it. They were all being kind, and every kind voice was somebody who'd read it. Thursday, Kellen Orthopedic canceled a maintenance contract I'd had for 9 years. The office manager wouldn't say why. She said budget. She said it twice. So I did what I've done my whole life. I waited it out. Silence is dignity. That's what my father's silence was not, and what mine was going to be. It didn't pass. It sat there, and it got bigger, the way a stain does. I called Walt on the Friday. They can't put that in print, I said. It's a lie. They already did. So I stay quiet and it dies. Walt made a noise into the phone. Saul, quiet only works if somebody else is telling the truth for you. He let that sit. Nobody is. I wrote Grant an email that night, 4 paragraphs. I read it back and deleted every word because it was begging, and I had made it 62 years without begging. 8:40. My phone rang. Ashfield area code, an older woman's voice. Is this the Solomon Nichols who used to pay at window 3? Her name was Marjorie Vance. 34 years in the bursar's office at Ashfield State, retired in 2019. Now she keeps minutes for the Scholarship and Honors Committee, which is what happens to competent people who retire in small towns. I saw the interview, she said. I knew the name before he finished the sentence. Ma'am, a lot of people are named Nichols. Not a lot of them paid by money order for 6 straight years. She'd remembered me for one reason, and it wasn't sentiment. In 34 years at that counter, I was the only person who ever paid a full degree that way, start to finish. It made me a nuisance in her records. It made me easy to remember. Then she gave me 3 pieces of news, and I had to sit down on the tailgate. The first. On May 16th, Ashfield State would award an honorary doctorate to Grant Nichols at commencement, along with the announcement of a $40 million scholarship endowment. The Self-Made Scholars Fund. The second. The citation the provost would read aloud contained a line about a graduate who overcame a childhood without family support. That's in the university's mouth, she said, not his. That's our problem now. The third came slower. There's an award we've given since 1996, she said. The Ashfield Bell. It goes to the family that made a first-generation graduate possible. Nominations closed in February. All right. Mr. Nichols, I need to tell you something. Your file's already in front of the committee. You nominated me? There was a pause on that line. I didn't understand at the time and wouldn't for another 3 months. The paperwork is in front of the committee, she said again. Now. The bursar's ledgers are university property. They're in our own archive. Do you object to the school reading them? 2 days after that, a woman named Dana Whitlock called, business reporter. She'd been hired by the publisher to fact-check the memoir, which she explained is standard on nonfiction and boring 90% of the time. Chapter 3 doesn't match the county deed records, she said. The Bell Hollow sale. I'd like to understand it. I made her wait while I thought. It cost me maybe 40 seconds and she didn't fill them, which told me she was good at her job. Miss Whitlock, I'll give you 3 rules. Go ahead. 1. I won't tell you anything that happened inside that house. No dinners, no arguments, none of it. Understood. 2. I won't say one negative word about my son. Not one. You can ask 9 different ways. And 3. I'll confirm what's already on paper in a public office, and I'll tell you which office. That's the whole of it. You read it yourself, and you write what you find. She was quiet a second. Mr. Nichols, most people in your position want more than that. Most people in my position want to be right. I already am. I just want it written down somewhere that isn't my kitchen. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. What do you want out of this? I don't want him punished, I said. I want the paper to say what it says. Before she hung up, she told me one more thing, and she told it flat, the way you hand somebody a hot pan. The publisher can stop a book. They'd stopped 2 the year before. If the check fails, it doesn't go to print. I sat with that. The book came out in September. Commencement was the 16th of May. One of those was going to arrive first, and I didn't get to pick. The Recorder of Deeds for Kellen County opens at 9. I was there at 8:40 with coffee in a thermos. Fluorescent light with a flutter in it. Damp paper smell. A line of 4, all of us there for something we'd rather not be there for. $12 a copy certified. I asked for 2. The Bell Hollow sale, September 2003, instrument number 2003-114772. And the Kestrel filing out of Harrisburg, March 2012. The clerk slid them under the glass in a manila envelope, and I carried them out to the truck and read the second one for the first time in 14 years. Registered office, 1140 Fenner Street, registered agent, Solomon Nichols. And on the line below my son's signature certifying it, he was 25. He made the S too big, the way he always has. I sat there with the engine off, and I understood something that had nothing to do with law. There was a piece of paper in the world where we were still on the same page, and neither of us had looked at it since. I was pulling my keys out when a man knocked on my window. Charcoal suit in a county records lot on a Tuesday. Outside counsel for Kestrel. He'd flown in. $2 million, he said. Plus a residence in Ashfield deeded to you free and clear. Signature by the 16th. $2 million. I want to be honest with you because otherwise none of this is worth listening to. I sat in that truck for 20 minutes and I did the arithmetic. I have never in my life earned $2 million. I thought about Riley's college. I thought about buying back a house with green window frames. Then I thought about page 41. I folded the offer in half, put it in Ellen's notebook under the words college fund, and started the truck. Let me stop the story one more time because I've got a real question, not a throwaway one. They put a number on my wife's name and slid it across a parking lot. What's the amount somebody once offered you to stay quiet about something true? Put it in the comments. Just the number and one word for what it was about. And if you think I should have taken the $2 million, say so. I won't argue with you. I nearly took it. All right, May 16th. I still can't tell this part straight, so let me just tell it. Everything came apart on their end in 11 days, and I watched it from a rented room above a laundromat. May 12th, the publisher wrote to Kestrel. Chapters 1 through 4 failed verification. They wanted an explanation for the deed record and the incorporation filing. Printing was on hold. The same afternoon, Marjorie called. The Honors Committee pulled a line from the citation. Which line? Childhood without family support. She sounded like a woman reading a shipping manifest. It conflicts with our own bursar records. We don't put things in the provost's mouth that our archive contradicts. They're still giving him the degree. Of course, he built a company. That part is true. A pause. We just don't lie at our own commencement. Curtis called me 11 times. I stopped counting at 11 because I put the phone in a drawer. Grant sent one message 3 days before. Please. That was all of it. One word, no punctuation after. And then the thing that decided it. Bianca emailed Marjorie Vance directly and asked the committee to withdraw the Ashfield Bell Award. This award creates a narrative conflict. Please advise on a quiet withdrawal. Marjorie forwarded it to all 9 committee members without comment. They voted 7-1 to keep it. One abstention, a man who taught Grant statistics in 2007 and said he couldn't be objective. Here's the part nobody in that company ever understood. Curtis Denham reviewed the commencement program. He reviewed the pages with his client's name on them. He never read the front matter, because why would a crisis man read a small-town award that's been given out since 1996? So on May 16th, my son was going to sit on that stage in a red robe 4 chairs from me, and he was not going to know it until the lights went down. I got up at 4:30. I always do before something. I pressed the only suit I own. It's the one I buried Ellen in, and I'd had the waist let out in April by a tailor on 2nd Street who didn't ask questions. In my breast pocket I put her library card, expired November 1996. I don't know why I do that. I've stopped asking myself. The invitation was from the university, on university stock with a seat assignment, honored guest section, 2nd row, chair 9. It was already 80 degrees at 10. Cut grass, sunscreen. 4,200 people in a stadium built for football, and 1,100 graduates fanning themselves with programs. The faculty came in first in their colored hoods, then the platform party. My son walked in third from the end in a scarlet robe with a doctoral hood somebody had flown in from New York. He looked out at the crowd exactly once at the press box, and then not again. He kept his eyes on the back of the man ahead of him the entire walk. Riley was in the front row with her mother. She turned around, scanning the honored guest section, and when she found me, she stood straight up on the seat, and Bianca's hand came down on her shoulder and put her back. Then Bianca turned and looked where Riley had been looking. She found me in about 4 seconds. I want you to understand what her face did. Nothing. Nothing at all. And then she reached forward and touched Curtis Denham on the arm. By then it was too late for anybody. The university's live stream had been running for 9 minutes. The Ashfield bell rang 3 times to open the way it has since 1891, and the provost stepped to the microphone and said, "Before we confer today's honorary degree, we have an older tradition to observe." Marjorie Vance came to the lectern with a folder and reading glasses on a chain. She read it like an inventory. That's the thing I'll never forget. No feeling in it anywhere. 34 years of public service will do that to a voice, and it's why not one person in that stadium could argue with a word. The Ashfield Bell Award recognizes the family that made a first-generation graduate possible. Paper turning. 4,000 programs turning with it. A residence at 88 Bell Hollow Road, Ashfield, sold September of 2003. Instrument 2003-114772, Recorder of Deeds, Kellen County. Proceeds applied to medical debt and an education account. The screens on either side of the stage were 20 feet tall. They'd been cutting to whoever was speaking, now the left one changed. A scan, a money order stub, handwriting in the payer box. 32 tuition payments received at window 3 of this university's bursar's office, fall 2005 through spring 2011 by money order. Payer Solomon Nichols, not one payment late. A second stub. A third. Somewhere behind me a woman said, "Oh," out loud. "The award is given to a family," Marjorie said, and she took her glasses off, which was the only thing she did all morning that wasn't procedure. "This year the family is one man." 4,200 people stood up. I got up because you get up when a room does. My hands were shaking and I put them behind my back. On the platform, in the third chair from the end, my son stayed seated. The right-hand screen was still cutting to the stage, so the whole stadium got both at once. 32 receipts on the left, Grant's face on the right. Nobody had to say he lied. Nobody said it. They just put the two pictures next to each other and let the arithmetic happen. Then the provost stepped back up. And now, this year's honorary doctorate. He walked to the lectern. There was a speech on it in 18-point type. Approved time 90 seconds. He looked down at it. Then he looked up past the graduates into the second row. He held there. 7 seconds. I counted those too. It was longer than the 2 seconds in his living room, which is how I knew he was actually deciding this time. Then he put his hand flat on the page and read it. All of it. Every word is written, including the line in the middle. I learned early that no one was coming to help me. He said that into a microphone in a stadium 25 minutes from the counter where I stood 32 times. Nobody booed.
I want to be clear about that because people always ask. Ashfield State is not that kind of place, and these were families in good clothes on a hot morning. What happened was worse. Nothing happened. 1,100 graduates sat there. The applause at the end lasted about 4 seconds, and it came mostly from the platform party, who are obligated. I watched 3 reporters get up out of the press box and walk out with phones already at their ears. Bianca stood, took Riley by the wrist, and started up the aisle in the middle of it. Riley pulled her arm free, right there in front of everybody, 13 years old. She sat back down in the front row by herself and folded her hands. There was one thing he changed. The approved text named the endowment, the Self-Made Scholars Fund. When he got to it, he said, a $40 million scholarship endowment, and moved on. He couldn't make himself say the name. That was the entire amount of courage available to my son that morning, and I've decided it was real, and it wasn't nothing, and it wasn't enough. Then the provost said, Mr. Nichols, would you care to say a few words? I had planned to say no. I'd been planning to say no since 2009. I walked up, no notes. A man my age either knows it by heart or he shouldn't be talking. I said 4 things. First, I didn't come here to take anything from my son. He built that company. I loaned him a workbench and an extension cord, and he did the rest, and he did it working harder than I ever have. You could hear the stadium settle when I said that. They'd come ready for a fight, and I'd taken it off the table in 9 seconds. Second, I came about a name that got left out. My wife did not vanish. Ellen Nichols died on November 14th, 1996. She was 34 years old. She was the librarian at Ashfield Elementary, 8 miles from where you're sitting, and for 11 years she forgave every fine any child ever owed her. Somebody in the graduate section started crying. You can hear that in a crowd. Third, there's a $40 million fund being announced this morning. I'd like to make a request of the university, and it's only a request because it isn't my money and it isn't my school. I looked at the provost. Name it after her. Fourth, I won't be accepting money from anyone. Not today, not later. I've got 2 hands and a toolbox and 35 years of work left in me, if my back holds. I stepped back from the lectern. I did not look at my son. I want to be honest about that. It was not mercy. I couldn't do it, and I knew I couldn't, and I've thought since that it landed harder than looking would have. The provost stayed standing while I walked down the steps. Then he leaned into the microphone and said, "The request is noted." I got as far as the parking lot before somebody called my name. He came across Lot C, still in the scarlet robe, holding the hood in one hand like a coat he'd taken off a chair. He was crying. I know how my son cries. I've known since he was 9 in a plastic hallway chair, and it hasn't changed at all. And it took the legs out from under me. "You were right," he said, "about all of it. Every part. All right. I should have said it up there. I had it in my mouth." "I know you did." He wiped his face with the flat of his hand, the same way he did on the couch that night, and he took a breath, and in that same breath he said, "Would you put out a short statement? Just that it was a misunderstanding. Roadshow starts Monday." There it was. He wasn't apologizing. He was still negotiating. He'd been negotiating since the parking lot started, and probably since the stadium, and I finally understood that a man can mean every tear on his face and still be working the deal underneath it. I reached into my jacket and took out Ellen's library stamp. Doreen had found it wedged in the cardigan. "Give this to Riley," I said. "Not to the company, to Riley." He turned it over in his hand.
wooden handle worn smooth on one side where his mother's thumb went. "Dad, are you going to talk to that reporter?" "I already did." His face went. "I told her which offices to visit," I said. "Kellen County and Harrisburg. She read the paper herself. I never said one word against you, and I never will." He stood there in that robe in the heat. "I'll answer the phone whenever you call," I told him. "For the rest of my life. I won't ever say something untrue to make your Monday easier." 11 days. I'll give it to you the way it came to me, which was mostly through Walt reading things off his phone at the diner. Dana Whitlock's piece ran on a Tuesday, front of the business section. The headline was flat, and the copy was flatter. 3 public records cited by instrument number. Not one adjective in the whole thing. I've read it maybe 40 times looking for the place where she took a side, and it isn't in there. The publisher canceled the memoir and demanded return of the advance, $1.8 million. The anchor investor was a state pension fund. They withdrew a $200 million commitment and used the phrase leadership integrity risk in a letter that became public within a week. Kestrel postponed the offering 2 quarters. The valuation went from $14 billion to $9.6. The amended prospectus added a line about early-stage family support and the address of an appliance shop on Fenner Street. The university kept the honorary degree. They rewrote the citation. In September, the board voted 9-0 to rename the endowment the Ellen Nichols First Generation Fund. 18 students a year. On my end, 4 maintenance contracts came back and 31 new customers called who never had before, and by August, I had to hire a kid named Marcus, who's better with a multimeter than I was at his age. Here's what I need you to hear, though, because people get this part wrong when they retell it. Nobody went to jail. Nobody went broke. Grant is still the chief executive and still owns most of what he built. A number went down, $4.4 billion, and a woman got her name back. That's the whole score. That's all of it. I thought I'd feel something bigger. What I mostly felt was tired, right up until Bianca's car came up Fenner Street. She drove 2 hours to stand in my new shop, which is half the size of the old one and smells like solder. She didn't cry this time. I'll say this for her, she came at me straight, and after 4 months of soft voices, it was almost a relief. "They removed me from the foundation board." "I heard." "You did that." I wiped my hands on a rag and set it down. "The committee did that. I never gave your name to anyone." "Riley won't be seeing you." She said it evenly. "I'm her mother. I decide." I've thought about my answer a lot since. I didn't threaten her. I didn't mention a lawyer. I just described the situation because it was already true, and neither of us could change it. "Riley's 13, I said. "In 3 years she drives. In 5 she picks her own Thanksgiving." "That's a threat." "That's a calendar." She stood there with her arms crossed in a room with one window. Then I told her the other thing, and it's the reason she left the way she did. "Miss Whitlock asked me 9 different ways about you. The storage unit, the email to the committee, the 12 pages. I let that land. I gave her none of it. It's not in the article because I didn't put it there. She stared at me. "Why? Because your daughter has to grow up with you." Curtis Denham had been separated from the company by mutual agreement the day before. They needed one and it was him, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I'd expected to. Bianca got to the door and turned around. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said, and that's the part she couldn't stand. I watched it hit her. That's the piece you'll have the hardest time believing. Riley showed up on a Saturday in July on the interstate bus with her father's permission and a backpack. I'd been looking for 6 weeks for something. Doreen's book lot went to a shop in Scranton, and I drove out there 4 times before the owner let me go through the back bins myself. I found it on the 4th trip, $3. I gave it to Riley on the workbench. She opened the back cover. The stamp was there, purple, faded, a little crooked, the way her grandmother always did it. Ashfield Elementary Library. And the date, November 1996. "She stamped this 3 weeks before she died," I said. Riley put her whole hand flat on the page. "Grandma stamped this?" She looked up. "That means it's ours, right?" "That's right." Then she asked the real one the way she does. "Are you mad at Dad?" I could have softened it. Grandparents do. I decided she'd been lied to enough that year. Yes, I said, and I love him. Those two live in the same house. You'll find that out about somebody someday. She thought about it and accepted it, which is more than most adults manage. I taught her to change a dryer bearing that afternoon. She seated it backwards and the drum howled like a cat and she wanted me to fix it, and I made her pull it and do it again.
She got it the second time. We were putting the panel back on when she set it sideways, not looking up. Did you get that award I sent in? I stopped with the screwdriver in my hand. The what? The school thing, for my family history unit. She shrugged one shoulder. There was a form on their website. I filled it out in January. So that's the answer to the pause on the telephone. Marjorie never said she nominated me. I heard it that way because I was 62 and tired, and it was the only version I could imagine. The file went to the committee in January, 2 months before a television crew ever set foot in my son's living room. A 13-year-old put it there, for a homework assignment, the one her mother made her write over. I sat down on an overturned bucket in my own shop, and I couldn't talk for a minute, and Riley thought she'd broken something. The first scholarship ceremony was in November, in the library on campus. 60 folding chairs, coffee in a percolator, a table of grocery store cookies that Marjorie brought and pretended the school had ordered. 18 students, first in their families. A girl named Delia Vaughn stood up and thanked her mother by her full name, out loud, into a microphone, and said what shift she worked and at which hospital. I didn't speak. They offered, and I said no. And this time saying no was easy, because there was nothing left that needed saying. Grant Kane. Back row. No press release, no photographer, no robe. A gray sweater and a folding chair. He didn't try to sit with me. He didn't come up afterward. He left about 10 minutes early, during the coffee, the way you do when you don't want to be thanked for coming. Marjorie saw him go and looked at me over her glasses. Do you want to catch him? No, I said. He sat in the back row, like a man auditing a class he'd already failed. I let him. That was the new arrangement, and he was the one who had to walk through the door. In December, he called. He didn't want anything. That's how I knew it was different. 7 months of calls that all had an ask at the bottom, and this one just sat there. Can I take you to dinner? You can come to dinner, I said. I've got a table. Then I gave him 3 terms, and I gave them the way I write up a repair so there'd be nothing to interpret later. 1. No agreements. No non-disclosures, no letters, no attorneys. Not ever again. If a lawyer calls me about you, the answer is no before he finishes. Agreed. 2. Not a dollar. Not for the shop, not for a truck, not for my retirement, not slipped into an account. I don't need it and I won't take it. Dad. 2, Grant. A long breath on the line. Agreed. 3. If you speak about your mother in public at any point for the rest of your life, you use her name and you say what she actually did. He was quiet for a while. Ellen Nichols, he said, elementary school librarian, Ashfield. That's it. That's the whole list. I want to be plain here because I know what you're hoping I'll say next. I did not tell him I forgave him. He didn't ask me to. We haven't used that word, and I don't know that we ever will. There isn't a scene where it all gets cleaned up. There's a phone call in December, and 3 terms, and a man who said yes to all of them. What should I bring? He said. Nothing. What are you making? The pot roast your mother used to make. I looked at the stove. I've had 30 years of practice, and I still can't get it right. He laughed. First time since the parking lot. It's February now. I've got 2 rooms over the new shop on Fenner, small kitchen, a Formica table, and 1 extra chair because Riley comes on Saturdays and eats like a field hand. Last week, Grant did another interview. The offering got repriced in January, and the network wanted him back. I turned it on. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. He looked older, good suit, less of that shine they put on him before. The host worked through the numbers, and then at the end she asked the same question. They always ask it. It's the easy one. It's the one that makes everybody feel warm, and it costs the network nothing. Grant, who made this possible? I looked at the screen for about 3 seconds, then I turned the television off. I've had people ask me why, and some of them get annoyed with me for it, like I owe them the ending. Here's the truth.
His answer couldn't change anything anymore. I know, the university knows, and it's in their ledger in a box in a climate-controlled room. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania knows, and it's on a form with my name in the agent line. Kellen County knows, instrument 2003-114772. There are 18 kids a year walking around with her name on their paperwork, and if books remember who paid for them, then so does she. I poured a cup of coffee and sat down at my own table and opened the blue notebook because I keep tomorrow's calls in the back of it now. 2 service stops in Milton, 1 in Ashfield, bearing kit for a Maytag. The light over that table flickers sometimes. I put the bulb in myself. 30 years ago I watched my son from his kitchen. Now I watch from mine. It's smaller. Nobody asks me to step out of the shot. That's the end of the story, so let me come back out and ask you one thing before you go. If you'd been standing in that kitchen, would you have signed the $2 million and kept the peace, or would you have driven to the county office type 1 or 2? There's no wrong answer. I almost typed 1 myself. And if this sat with you, there's another one waiting in the description.
A mother who wasn't invited to her own daughter's wedding, and what the photographer noticed from the back of the room. Thank you for sitting with me tonight.